In this episode, we're going to go over what I believe is foundational to the success of your private practice. If you understand this principle, you're going to go very far and thrive in your private practice. But if you do not, it's going to cost you a lot. Let's get started. So Paul Graham wrote an essay called Don't Die. We're going to include it in the description below so you can have access to it and read it yourself. But in this essay, he goes over some incredible information and a concept that I believe will be valuable to you in your private practice. I'm going to start off with some statistics before we get into Paul Graham's essay. According to the Bureau of Labor and Statistics, 65% of businesses fail within the first 10 years. And according to the American Medical Association, as of 2022, only 46.7% of physicians worked in private practice. This number is down from 60.1% 10 years before. So there is a big, huge decrease, and that decrease is continuing to happen. The point is the odds are stacked against you. The odds of you starting your own private practice is stacked against you. We still believe that you can have success, but you need to understand how the odds are stacked against you and start that process with the right mindset. In Paul Graham's essay, he talks about the fact that survival is success. He says the most crucial advice for startups is simply to avoid dying. And he emphasized that. He says that the odds of a startup surviving from launch to liquidity without facing a major crisis are extremely low, about 1 in 1,000. So there's going to be some kind of crisis. He goes on to say that if you just avoid dying, you are guaranteed to succeed. And lastly, he talked about one of the key indicators that a business is going to die is they stop communicating with either their investors or their mentor or whomever, their colleagues. They stop communicating. And so if you can avoid those things, then you're on track. He talks about what are some of the keys to survival. One thing that he said was you got to stay focused, avoid distractions. Another thing he talked about was you must be determined. He talks about how many founders are more motivated by the fear of looking bad than they are of the prospect of getting rich. Make sure that you don't allow the fear of looking like you're not successful to stop you from being successful. Many people want to build a big, beautiful medical practice, and they want to spend tons of money on their advertising and marketing, and they want to, they want to appear successful in their private practice, when in actuality, they may be doing things that will harm the success of their practice. Another thing Paul Graham talked about was expect challenges. He says bad things are inevitably going to happen in your startup, but when they do, remind yourself not to ever, ever, ever give up. Next, he talks about the importance of being relentlessly resourceful. You're going to have to adapt as you go. You're going to have to be flexible. One thing that's notorious in the medical community, in the medical industry, is the lack of innovation. I always joke that there wouldn't be fax machines if there weren't still hospitals. They're the last ones who are truly using fax machines. As a private practice owner, we have to be way more flexible and adaptable than the bigger and larger organizations. Our flexibility and our ability to adapt is one of our competitive advantages as a smaller private practice. And also, Paul Graham talks about the importance of not getting demoralized. He says the underlying cause of startup death is usually lack of focus. And that lack of focus often comes from being demoralized. So here are a few quick pointers from what we've seen in our private practice. You want to make sure that you don't do anything personally that could kill your practice. It's the self-inflicted wound that you have to worry about. So make sure that you don't overspend on your location and do a big, huge build out when you don't necessarily need it. Make sure that you are conservative in your estimations of that budget. You want it to be as low as possible. Make sure that you avoid debt at all costs. Now, when I say avoid debt, I'm not saying don't borrow money, but what we're saying is borrow the lowest amount of money that you need for whatever that you're borrowing money for. If you are doing a build out, borrow the lowest amount of money that you need to get that build out done. The less debt you have, the less likely you are to be smothered by that debt. Another thing is beware of big equipment purchases. We've talked about this several times. There are more practices that experience financial distress and go out of business because they bought a big expensive equipment than practices that have made money and thrive because they bought expensive equipment. Let me say that again. You are more likely to experience financial distress or even go out of business because of major laser purchases or different things like that than you are to make money or thrive financially off of those purchases. Beware. And here are the 5 most common reasons why small businesses go out of business, according to the Bureau of Labor and Statistics. Number 1, no market need for their product or services. 42% of businesses go out of business because there's no market or no need for the product or service. As a dermatology practice, this is not something that you're most likely going to deal with. Unless you're in a geographic location that has hypersaturation and is dermatologists on every block, all over the place, you're most likely not going to have to deal with this because overall, the need for dermatology in the US is growing and the number of dermatologists is not meeting that need. So, for the most part, there's going to be a market and a demand for your service. The number 2 reason why practices go out of business is because they run out of cash, 29%. Now, this is where you want to be very careful with your cash flow management. You want to be conservative on your spending. You want to be conservative on your borrowing so you don't run out of cash. Number 3, not having the right team. 23% of practices go out of business because they don't have the right team. You want to make sure that you hire correctly, but more important than hiring correctly, because hiring is often a guess. You don't know who you have until they start working with you. More important than hiring correctly is you have to be willing to make the tough decision on removing non-performing, underperforming, or disruptive team members out of your team because they could be the cause of your practice failing. Number 4, being outcompeted. 19% of practices fail because they're being outcompeted. This is the reason why you want to always be looking to see what's going on in your area and to not necessarily copy the competition, but know what the competition is doing, know what others are doing, so you are up to breast with any new changes that are happening in the market. You want to view your competition not to see what they're doing, but to see how the market is doing. Are people asking for some different services that you may not be providing? Are they asking for some different product that you may not be providing? Are they asking that service or that product to be delivered in a way that you're not doing? It's important to be up on those things. In number 5, pricing and cost issues. 18% of businesses go out of business because of pricing and cost issues. You want to make sure that you keep your eye on the money coming in and keep your eye on the money going out. You want to make sure that your billing company is on point and they're getting all of the things billed correctly that need to get billed and getting you paid on those services. But you also want to make sure that you are pricing things correctly on the non-insurance items and that you are tracking your expenses. Just because you've been always buying from a certain supplier or buying from a certain company, you want to always be looking at prices out there to see if there's a lower or cheaper way that you can get some of the same services done. And to wrap up, the key point I want to make is remember, the odds are stacked against you. It is true that you're going to have to worry about providing a fantastic service for your patients. It is true that you're going to have to figure out how to create an excellent workplace environment for your team. It is true that you have design elements that you want to implement and you have ideas of creativity that you want to implement to your practice. But remember, above all else, your number 1 focus should be don't die. Because if you survive, you are guaranteed to win. That's a wrap for this episode of the Dermbiz Show. We hope you found today's discussion insightful and packed with value to help you navigate the challenges of running your private practice. We'd love to hear from you. Is there a specific topic you'd like us to cover or a question you want answered? Reach out to us at thedermbiz@gmail.com or drop us a message on social media. Your input helps us tailor the show to what matters most to you and your practice. Speaking of social media, don't forget to follow us on all of our platforms for updates, bonus content, and tips to keep your practice running smoothly. And of course, make sure you like, share, and subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. Thanks for tuning in today, and we can't wait to have you join us again the next time. Until then, take care, keep thriving, and we'll see you the next time on the Dermbiz Show.